Hey, and welcome to Access Online Week 34. Now, I normally film these intro type clips at the church or in my office or at home, but I'm actually out today starting some of the lunch deliveries for those of you who answered last week's challenge question. So somebody told me what their 2021 God-sized goal was, and they won a Taco Bell lunch because of it. But it was really awesome to hear from so many of you and to hear so many of your goals. There was one of you who expressed that you now want to get into the medical field because you want to be able to help people in a greater way. And another person stated that they want to really study the Lord's Prayer so they can grow closer to Christ. Another person expressed that they want to get baptized. Another person said that they want to become better friends to the friends that they have. And even another person stated that, one, they want to try to stop lying so much, but they also want to spend time in God's Word too. And these are excellent, excellent goals. Thank you so much for sharing them with me. And for those of you who maybe didn't get a chance to share your goal or didn't even know we were doing this, it's not too late to do so. You can tell your 2021 God-sized goal to your small group leader or me. 5 people have already won the free lunch, and so you telling your goals to us would be just to help yourself hold yourself accountable to that, but it's definitely a good thing to do. And keep on the lookout for maybe another free lunch opportunity sometime in the near future. But that's enough of that. Let's get things started today. This is Access Online Week 34. It was 2 weeks ago that we began this new goals series. And in that first lesson, we started off by talking about New Year's resolutions. But did you know that after about 2 weeks, or from the time that we started that first lesson series till about now, most people have already given up on New Year's resolutions. And by the end of January, fewer than 25% of people are still committed to the goals that they started then. That's because achieving goals is hard work. And even when we make detailed plans and have the best intentions of following through with those plans, it takes strength and commitment and perseverance to follow through. And I don't know what all of your goals are. It was really nice to hear some of them last week, but maybe you have set for yourself a spiritual goal, or a physical goal, or a mental goal, or a relational goal, or whatever else. Whatever goals you have right now, I've got some good news for you, and then I've actually got some bad news for you. The bad news is this. If you haven't already, you are going to experience opposition and frustration and a lack of motivation on your way to achieving that goal. But the good news is that there is hope when your goals are too much to handle on your own. When things get difficult and we feel weak or discouraged, there is a way to keep pursuing our goals and to finish strong. And the book of Nehemiah teaches us that way. Let me summarize our story so far so that we're all on the same page. Nehemiah is both the name of a book in the Old Testament and the name of that book's main character. And in Nehemiah's book is all about the city of Jerusalem and God's chosen people in the Old Testament called Israel. But a bit before Nehemiah's book began, or really a little over 100 years before actually, God's people were destroyed by an enemy army. And that enemy army, Babylon, they really did a number on them. They burnt down their villages. They toppled over their temple. They destroyed the walls of the city of Jerusalem. And however, and despite this, God did promise his people that they would be one day restored. And even though Babylon scattered the people of Israel all over the ancient Near Eastern world, God promised that he would one day bring them all back into the city of David. And Nehemiah is the story of the beginning of that restoration process. Nehemiah is an Israelite, but he's also the cupbearer to the king of Persia. He was living in Persia at that time. And when Nehemiah learned that certain Israelites were actually returning to Jerusalem, to the city of David, but the walls of Jerusalem were still destroyed, he knew that the Lord was calling him to something. And he set a God-sized goal of seeing those walls rebuilt. He spent months on his knees praying and fasting before the Lord. He spent time planning and preparing. And eventually Nehemiah went and he goes and he asks the king of Persia, he asks his very powerful boss for resources and for a leave of absence to see those walls built. And because of God's providence, the king said yes. Nehemiah was happy. The remnant of the people in Jerusalem were pumped. But as we'll see this week, not everyone was as excited as they were. Once Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem, he got right to work. He formed a team, and this team got pretty busy repairing the gates and the city walls. They didn't want to risk another big attack like what happened to them about 140 years before this period under the Babylonian invasion. These walls were really, really important to the structure of the city. But again, not everybody felt the same way. Not everybody wanted to see these walls built. So check this out. This is in Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. It says, "When Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates in the army of Samaria, he said, 'What are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from these heaps of rubble, burned as they are?' Tobiah the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, 'What are they building? Even a fox climbing up on it would break down their wall of stones.'" Even though Nehemiah and his team were being obedient to God, and even though the Lord himself allowed Nehemiah to head up this rebuilding process, Nehemiah and his team still had to deal with people who did not like what they were doing. There were people that were very open and willing to call them weak. There were people who were mocking the quality of work that they had done so far. There were people who were mocking their pain and their beliefs. There were people who were trying to crush their hopes. And on that same note, check out also Nehemiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 9. That says, "When word came to Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies that I had rebuilt the wall, and not a gap was left in it, though up to that time I had not set the doors and the gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent me this message. 'Come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Anno.' But they were scheming to harm me. So I sent messengers to them with this reply, 'I am carrying on a great project, and I cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you?' 4 times they sent me the same message, and each time I gave them the same answer. Then, the 5th time, Sanballat sent his aide to me with the same message, and in his hand was an unsealed letter, in which was written, 'It is reported among the nations, and Geshem says it's true, that you and the Jews are plotting to revolt, and therefore you are building the wall. Moreover, according to these reports, you are about to become their king, and have even appointed prophets to make this proclamation about you in Jerusalem. There is a king in Judah. Now this report will get back to the king, so come, let us meet together. I sent him this reply: Nothing like what you are saying is happening. You were just making it up out of your head. They were all trying to frighten us, thinking their hands will get too weak for the work and it will not be completed. As we see, opposition didn't just come from inside the city and inside their men and inside the struggles of exhaustion and just building a wall. It also came from the outside too. One of the leaders of a nearby nation, after hearing of Nehemiah's ambitious goal to rebuild the city walls, became a bit nervous. He didn't want Israel to gain power once again. So he started sending threats to Nehemiah, both trying to coax him out of the city to murder him, and also to spread rumors to frighten him that the king of Persia might hear about. But none of this actually worked. Nehemiah and his team did not let the internal threats or the external threats stop them from accomplishing their God-sized goal. And as it says in Nehemiah 4:8-9, they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to stir up trouble against it. But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. That is, Nehemiah, he knew that these threats were credible. He knew that he was in danger of not seeing his goal accomplished or in danger of death if he didn't do something about them. But he also knew that it was the Lord's will for this wall to be rebuilt. He knew that God would grant him the strength to press forward because of it. Nehemiah prayed. He had his team prioritize rest so they didn't become too fatigued from the work and from all the bullying. He posted guards at all hours and he kept going. Despite opposition, he kept moving forward. And when we face obstacles in opposition to our God-sized goals, we should too. A few of you know that before I came to Alpena, I was a pastor at a couple different churches. Well, I just wanted to share with you all a very condensed version of something that happened to me while serving in my very first ministry. A few months into my job as a new youth pastor in a really small rural town, even smaller than Alpena actually, the church that I was serving at went through a really rough church split. A few sinful acts caused this, and a lot of people in the church were really hurt by it. Many people left. A group of people from our congregation, they went out and they started another church, and then a few of us stayed behind and tried to fix and help what was left, including my wife and I. But again, because of the nature of the sin that caused this church split, there were a lot of people who were very hurt and very offended. And even though the people who actually committed the sin, including the senior pastor, left, our church, it became a symbol of hurt in many people's minds. It became a symbol of that feeling that they were feeling. And those of us who decided to stay behind and repair what was left were painted as enemies because of that. And because I was the only pastor at this church now, I then actually took the brunt of a lot of people's misplaced feelings. My wife and I, we received a lot of hate mail. We were called all kinds of nasty names. I was actually confronted by a screaming and angry man in the grocery store. And the guy yelling at me, he actually had to be taken out by security so that I could keep shopping. There were a few weeks when my wife and I would wake up to dead skunks and deer carcasses in our front yard and in our driveway, placed there overnight as unwanted presents for us by people who were trying to scare us out of the community. And somebody even broke into our church building and stole our financial records and our computers that we had the financial records backed up on, so we would get in trouble by the IRS come tax season. Behavior like this, it went on for well over a year. And my wife and I, we were so tempted to pack up and run on many different occasions, but we both knew that God wanted us to stay. And in our 4.5 years within this church after that incident, we really had to rely on God's strength to get us through. We also really had to rely on a community of believers who were willing to encourage us and pour into my wife and I's lives. We had to take time to rest for the sake of our mental health from time to time too. But most importantly, we just had to resolve to keep going as an act of obedience to the Lord. Some of you have already told me your goals. Some of you still might be thinking about what your goals might be. But when you face opposition to these goals, and remember, you will face opposition, I want you to remember what Nehemiah can teach us about discouragement. Opposition can come from both inside and it can come from outside. People might try to belittle you, or they might try to flat out bully you for wanting to pursue your goals. People might mock you or try to crush your hopes, but don't let them do that. Instead, and when you face opposition, take it to God. Ask Him for strength and then resolve to move forward. Choose community. Find that group of friends who has your back and who will encourage you to continue to press forward. And make sure you rest when you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, but don't forget to keep going. If your goal honors God, or if it was given to you by God, then yes, God can help you see it through no matter what. Take it from Nehemiah, or take it from the story of my first ministry. God gives us strength to pursue God-sized goals.